why it is.
But no one will ever put me to the jury.
The one attorney that was there, I don't think he got disqualified because he was an attorney. I think he got disqualified, no, I think he got disqualified because he was hit up.
But then they just say,
when I was driving through,
could you still be fair and impartial? And he said yes, and then they sued him.
the rain was coming down so hard that cars were literally getting washed off the road. It was
They
crazy.
picked, basically, there was one girl who.
Somebody would have slammed on the brake at all. Just like everybody instinctively put their foot off the gas. It was just kind of toasted into the.
That's true, when they were having all that bad weather. Oh, wow.
Revving it up, bad news. Driving a truck too, bad.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
So no rear way.
it was just a,
Oh, yeah.
You gonna do the minutes
see
first?
the
or you
road,
wanna leave that
all I
for
could
now?
see is tail light in front of
Do this first? Okay.
car. So
No.
That's,
it's sort of toasted, 20 miles.
Full plant.
Hope that nobody did any trade.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
true.
well, you can just
Right.
pray that, yeah, they know where they're going.
Heaviest rain.
Even what is the check? Had horrible downpours.
Just a little font. I got 1 minute till.
So I'm assuming you have the state attorney and the public defender. Good. Yeah.
Wow. There was a lot of there was a lot of objections and sustained things, and they actually brought in their own expert, which wasn't like supposed to be expert. I swear. But I do want to tell you, there was I do not feel to this day. There was me.
You got 7.
But he
That
did.
wasn't your.
He left.
But he did blow double. So
Did they have a dash cam video?
Number, the first guy just left.
it was 7 o'clock. Now we got it. It's now done.
You ready? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Adjustment meeting for August 24, 2016. We have, Ms. Others, please call the roll.
Chairman Elliott,
Here.
Mr. Urbowski,
Here.
Mr. Burris, Mr. Eisner,
Here.
Ms. Whitney,
Here.
In case the board is not aware, Ms. Domino has resigned, unfortunately, and hope she
Ms. Sanner.
works things out. Huh?
Ms. Sanders.
Sanner. Oh, sorry. That's her old name, right? Cindy Sanner. Shows you how old I am. Okay. Okay, next up, we could have our legal counsel please explain a few things to us.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Board of Adjustment acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any parties here wishing to speak or give testimony this evening? If you could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Any of the applicants who are going to speak or anyone speaking on their behalf? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I can,
So sworn.
Thank you, Ms. Aguero. The next item is the approval of minutes. We have 2 minutes to approve. First, February 24th, 2016. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carried. Next, for March 23rd, 2016. Your motion?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. That's 2 months down and 2 months more to go. Is that correct? We have 2 months left?
no, there's several more months to go.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get those down pretty quickly. Okay, briefly, my name is Herb Elliott. I'm the chairman. And if you do speak tonight, please silence your cell phones and come up to the podium and state your name and your address, please. First item then is a variance to reduce the side and rear yard setbacks for 721 South Distant Avenue. See, the applicant is present. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes. This application is to authorize a two-part variance to reduce the side setback to 6 feet 11 inches and the rear setback to 17 feet 11 inches to allow construction of an attached garage in the residential office district. The subject property is located at the corner of Distant Avenue and Mango Street. The property is currently being used as a home. However, the property is zoned RO, or residential office. The applicant is requesting permission to construct a 4-car attached garage. The applicant would like to keep the garage in line with the existing home, which is the reason for the variance. The applicant is asking for the two-part variance, the request for the side yard at 6 feet 11 inches and the rear yard at 17 feet 11 inches. The subject property consists of 2 lots. The lots are regular in shape. The subject property has a width of 66 feet and a depth of 132.42 feet, which meet the minimum dimensional criteria for the RO district. The applicant has not demonstrated any type of physical hardship with the property. The structure is currently non-conforming. The setbacks for the existing structure is 6 feet 11 inches, and the hardship created is due to the applicant's desire to keep the proposed garage in line with the existing home. The property is currently developed with the home, and the lot is of sufficient size that the applicant could reconfigure the garage and place it on the property without the need of a variance. Granting the variance would confer a special privilege that is not allowed for other lands and buildings or structures in the same zoning district. Granting the variance would not negatively affect the property values in the area or create a nuisance. Notice was provided to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. The legal notice was published in the Tampa Bay Times. Staff this is actually incorrect. Staff has not received any additional letters or questions from anybody in the neighborhood. Again, the findings of fact, the request is to reduce the side yard setback to 6 feet 11 inches and the rear yard setback to 17 feet 11 inches to allow construction of the attached garage. There is no physical hardship associated with the request. The lot is regular in shape and meets the minimum dimensional criteria for the RO district. The structure is non-conforming. The granting of the variance would extend a special privilege to the applicant. Granting this variance would not hinder the character of the existing neighborhood and would not create a nuisance. The request does not conform to the general intent of the LDC and policies of the comprehensive plan, and therefore staff recommends denial of the requested variance to reduce the side yard setback to 6 feet 11 inches and the rear yard setback to 17 feet 11 inches to allow construction of that attached garage. This request does not meet the review criteria established in section 215.02B and 215.02.5 of the LDC. And with that, I can answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. First of all, any ex parte communication to the board, need to disclose that on this item? I have kind of one. I did the closing for this property back when the applicant purchased it. I represented the seller, however, not the purchaser, and that's my only connection with this property as in my private capacity. I was somewhat involved as city attorney back when it was rezoned, and I may want to say a few things about that at the appropriate time. But is the applicant in the audience? Okay, Mr. Reynolds, would you like to come up here and make your presentation if you like, sir?
Good evening, everyone. Only thing I can say is I was just wanting to keep the structure in line with what I'm trying to, the addition that I'm trying to put onto the building. That's the only reason why I asked for the variant. But that's pretty much it.
You're also entitled to cross-examine the staff if you like. You have the opportunity to ask her any questions if you want to. But you don't want to? No,
No, sir.
that's fine. All righty, let's ask the board any comments or questions. Okay. Mrs. Dabbs, just give me a minute. Okay, the next item on our agenda is for the board to make comments, I believe. Some 40 years ago, this property was owned, I believe the applicant was a gentleman by the name of Oscar Oliver, and he wanted to make some kind of a commercial use of this property, and it's on the corner of Mango Street and Diston. And at that time, I don't see any old-timers here. I guess that makes me kind of old. But at that time, we had a doctor in town, Dr. Hercules Diamandis. And his mad passion, bless his heart, was right-of-way acquisition in Tarpon Springs and building roads. And part of that was the Mango Street, Mears Boulevard corridor. And I believe it's on our comprehensive plan for Mango Street to connect to Mears Boulevard, to go from Florida Avenue to US 19. Does that ring a bell, Kim? Yeah.
That is correct.
And
Yes.
Chairman Elliott, I just hate to interrupt you here, but as far as what you're saying
Yeah,
here, this
I'm
is
getting
considered.
I know it's not evidence. I would just get a little
I
background.
understand. I just, legally for the record, this is considered testimony, and the board members are to
Yes,
consider this
okay,
when
well,
making their decision.
I have a question. Ultimately, it kind of gets to the. So my question then is, since this corridor is in our comprehensive plan, I just want to make sure that if the variance is granted, that it's not going to have any effect on the setback along Mango Street. Is that correct? The building is still there?
The existing structure is at the current setback that's being requested on the front. The rear setback would not be affected in this case because you're only dealing with the side setback where the side of that is adjacent to Mango Street. So since the existing structure is already at that, acquisition of right-of-way additionally to the rear of this property is not going to impact this because you can't get what you need to get at, which is a larger intersection opening because of the location of this current structure, without acquiring the property or coming up with some type of alternative for the applicant.
Okay, I think that answers my question. With respect to the side yard setback, the building now sits at 6 feet 11 inches. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And with the new, if the new garage is built, it would still be 6 feet 11 inches, correct?
That is correct.
So I would think we're operating under the, then it's a non-conforming structure, correct?
That is
Or you-
correct.
So we're expanding a non-conforming structure, and we have the power to grant a variance to that? Is that the power we're going under?
You're granting the expansion of a existing setback for a non-conforming structure. That is correct.
And there's another ordinance that says that we're not allowed, there's two different ordinances I recall. One says we're allowed to grant a variance to expand a non-conforming structure, and arguably the other one says we're not.
You are allowed to expand a non-conforming structure through the variance process if this board so chooses. The variance process is available in this particular case to allow for an expansion of this use for the addition of the garage, provided they come through that variance process.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Okay, any comments? Mrs. Dabbs, you had a comment, please? Mrs. Dabbs, by the way, is a member of another board for the city, the Code Enforcement Board.
My name is Annie Doris Dabbs, and I reside at 803 South Distance Avenue. That is the southeast corner of Distance Avenue, just across the street from the northeast corner of which Mr. Reynolds is the owner. I built my house in 1978, and the building was there already. There's a couple of exceptions. There was no sidewalk. There was a tree in the middle of the road, and I'm not sure how they got to build the building with the setbacks at that time, because like I said, there was no sidewalk. It was a narrow road, tree in the middle of the road, which the city eventually took out. So Mr. Reynolds is asking for this variance in the setback to put his garage on the back of his existing building. The back of the building, it just requires 2 feet, I say, because it says 2 feet and 1 inch, which is not a lot to ask for. The side is a difference, but the building was there probably before he was born. And like I say, I don't know how the setbacks, what the city did at that time, because my house is just about 33, 34 years old, and the building was there. So he's just asking to put a garage on the back of his existing building, and it would be on the corner, and it would be to the rear end, not up near the corner. When you come to the front of the building, yes, it looks a little bit narrow because the city put in a sidewalk. It didn't look that way when the building was built before the sidewalk was put in. So I'm just asking that you evaluate those things, because it seems as if the building is already grandfathered in. Am I right? Maybe not.
Okay.
Any questions for me?
Any questions for Mrs. Dabbs?
But like I said, I just ask that you grant his variance to put his garage on the back of his building, to keep it in line with the existing structure, conformative or not.
So, Annie, are you saying that you're in favor of the variance, both of them?
Yes, I'm in favor of it, and like I said, I never got a notice from the city, and I live right across the street.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions from the board?
I just want to know, the notices go out?
The notices did go out 200 feet from the property.
I do have a question. This is a 2-part variance, and I understand the setback for the 6 feet 11 inches because that would line up with the building. But the back end of it, where they're requesting the 17 feet 11 inch variance, that wouldn't affect the look or the line of the building if that setback was not granted, correct?
It would affect the size of the structure that he could build.
Right, but as far as how he wants it to line up
No.
with the rest of the building, that would not be
Not on that rear side,
relevant
no.
in that. Okay, thank you.
So for the benefit of the public and myself, it's really about a 2-foot variance in the rear. Instead of being a 20-foot setback, he's going to about 18 feet. And then on the side, it's going to be the same as what it is right now. Any further comments or questions from anybody? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call, please, Ms. Yelders.
Miss Whitney,
Deny.
Mr. Eisner,
Approve.
Mr. Obowski,
Yes.
Mr. Elliott.
Yes. Opinion of the chair, the motion is passed 3-1. So, thank you very much. Mr. Reynolds, your variance has been approved. You have 2 years to start construction. Okay. The next item on the agenda is this fence variance. Is the applicant here? Would you mind if we took the Wendy's first ahead of yours? He's got I think it'd be very non-controversial and nothing having to do with your variance, but this gentleman has to go back to Manatee County, so I appreciate it very much. So let's move on then to, and number 6 has been withdrawn, Keystone Ridge Circle. Number 7 is a variance to reduce the front setback of 912 East Tarpon Avenue. That's the Wendy's property. Okay, any ex parte communication on this one from the board? Ms. Erwiller, please.
The application is to authorize a variance to reduce the front yard setback to 25 feet to allow replacement of an existing fast food restaurant in the Highway Business District. The subject property is located at the corner of Tarpon Ave and US Highway 19 North. According to the property's record, the structure was built in 1976. The applicant is seeking to demolish the existing structure and replace it with a slightly smaller facility. In December of 2015, FDOT acquired a portion of the existing site as a future right-of-way for the eventual expansion of 19 and upgrades of the Tarpon Ave US 19 intersection. The portion of the property acquired by FDOT included part of the existing landscape buffer, parking spaces, and the exit for the drive-through traffic. In attempting to redevelop the restaurant and comply with the required setbacks for the Highway Business Zoning District, it became apparent that the northeast corner of the building would need a variance of 5 feet. The applicant is requesting a front yard setback of 25 feet for the northwest corner of the building. The required front setback in the Highway Business District is 30 feet. The variance is due to the acquisition by FDOT of right-of-way. At this time, FDOT has no immediate plans to expand US 19. The reduction of the front yard setback by 5 feet should have no impact on the FDOT's future plans. The existing building does not meet the setbacks in its current location, and the applicant is actually reducing the nonconformity by reducing the size of the facility and relocating the building on site. The right-of-way is actually provided by FDOT, or was provided to FDOT by a previous owner at that time. At the time of acquisition, the right-of-way, the restaurant was for sale, and the new owner did not create the hardship. By demolishing the building and relocating a smaller structure on the property, the applicant is reducing that nonconformity. And the new owner and Wendy's Corporation have worked with staff to reduce the variance request. This request is a minimum request necessary to make the site and the building safe, to make the site and building function safely and efficiently. The applicant could do nothing, and the existing nonconforming structure would remain as is. With the proposed variance, the nonconformity is reduced, and the applicant will provide additional space between the structure and the right-of-way of Tarpon Avenue. The request does not confer a special privilege on the applicant. It simply provides for a safe, more efficient site. Granted, the variance will allow for a modern facility to be developed on site. The new building will be more attractive, and additional landscaping is proposed that will make the site more appealing. The proposed improvements will enhance the area and not create a nuisance. Again, notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. Legal notice was published in the Tampa Bay Times, and the property was posted. Staff has received, actually, this is not true either. Staff did not receive any letters in support or in objection to this application. There's actually been no correspondence on this application. With that, findings of fact, the request is to reduce the front yard setback to 25 feet. The proposed variance rises out of the physical hardship of the land. In this case, FDOT's right-of-way acquisition complicates the development of this site. The existing building is non-conforming. The proposed new building will reduce the non-conformity. The request is to a minimum variance necessary to provide for a safe and efficient site. The granting of the variance would not extend a special privilege to the applicant, and the granting of this variance would not hinder the character of the existing neighborhood, would not create a nuisance. The request does conform to the general intent of the LDC and the policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of the requested variance to reduce the front yard setback to 25 feet. The request does meet the review criteria established in sections 215.02B, 215.02.5 of the Land Development Code, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Erwiller. Any questions from the board, and then we'll go to the applicant?
Yes, I'm curious, so this in no way is preempted by any state provision because of the...
That is correct. We are allowed to grant variances regardless of the acquisition in this particular case. What happens with the acquisition is it changes their property line boundary. As a result of that change in property line boundary, that's what necessitates this variance. Basically, when they acquired the additional right-of-way, which is shown in your backup, they acquired a large portion of the corner of that property, essentially affecting where the property boundary line is, and included parking and included the buffer. As a result, the city does tend to work with applicants in this particular situation to try to come to a compromise. In this case, this is the fairest compromise that everybody could come to, and it required that reduction in the side of the building.
Is this
for
the
that
only
one
property
corner.
that's being affected? It seems like some of the other buildings protrude as well, like Arby's, for instance.
Okay, those buildings aren't subject to this application,
Right.
and if when they come in for any renovations or remodels, that'll be the time at which we would make changes to those buildings. Really, what's causing this is Wendy's wants to come in and do the upgrades to the building. If they didn't, it would stay as is, as long as they wanted to have that
Right.
building there.
Okay.
It's
And so
not until they
when the state comes
request
in and
it.
expands, when the state comes in and expands, this will not affect that.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
It will be 5 feet closer than what it would normally be. Okay.
Anyone else? I may have missed it in the report, Heather, it was a very fine report. The taking was along Tarpon Avenue or along 19?
The taking was along 19. However, it also takes part of the corner of the property, which affects Tarpon Avenue, because that is actually a corner lot.
All right, the applicant care to make your comments?
That would be nice. My name is Dale Ream. My address is 31750 State Road 64 East, Mayaca City, Florida, 34251. I work for Infinity Engineering Group. We have the Wendy's representative here. And we have some nice renderings of what the new building, this is one of their new prototype buildings. It's going to be a very nice building. The DOT has been contacted about the future expansion in their right-of-way. That is not even on their 5-year plan at this point in time. We are also providing some very nice stormwater upgrades on this site. Currently, the site drains onto the DOT right-of-way, and it's kind of rough looking, to say the best. We're going to put an underground storage system in with the redevelopment that will give some water quality, and it'll give some attenuation with the development.
Before I get too far, would you mind swapping the posters so the folks in cyberspace can see it? The cameras are back there, so you can just put one of them in front here, so maybe the cameraman can see what it looks like.
We have also looked at the site. If DOT does eventually close off the secondary access, we can make the site work for the traffic circulation. That's all been designed into it.
Secondary access being Tarpon.
You have an in and an out, and the out is adjacent to the drive-through, and that's where the corner clip took place from DOT. So if they do close off the secondary access at some point in time, we can use the primary. And there's also back accesses into the overall shopping center.
Questions from the board? Any comments from the audience? Seeing and hearing none. The next. I'm sorry, when you say the primary and secondary, I don't know which is which. Can you be a little more?
The primary I'm saying is the in movement into the.
Which driveway is it?
It would be the, gotta get my bearings here. It would be the.
It would be on Tarpon Avenue, the westerly entrance, because currently the building is very close to the right of way, so you cannot actually go into the front of the building. You have to go around the building and then come out. When FDOT cut their right of way off there, they basically included that driveway as future, that they would be acquiring that portion of the driveway. That would actually be used as to alleviate some of the intersection congestion that can happen when you elevate a roadway. As a result, they're pushing the building back, which is reducing the nonconformity that they already have, which would allow for that circulation that currently can't go along the front. They would be able to go around the building, come back, and then come right back out the same access point. They would have to alter the access point because it's not wide enough right now, but there is enough room for them to do that there.
Is that going to be a one-way or be one way around the building?
Right now, it's one way, but if in the future that they needed to close that secondary right of way, they would basically, it would still be a one-way movement, but you would come back out the same entrance you come in. So the only in out would be the actual entrance way to the right of way.
But they'd have to change the size of the inn, correct?
Yes, right now it probably is not sufficient size because it's only meant for that entrance into the facility right now. It's not meant for an ingress egress. That there is enough land for them to make that conversion. They would just have to come back in and do that modification at any time in the future when FDOT requires them to do so. It would be part of their negotiations with FDOT to come to us and ask for that modification. It would not come to this board. It would come probably to our TRC, and then more than likely through the permitting process.
And the driveway currently is 24 feet on the westerly side. That's the driveway we're talking about.
Any more comments from the board? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Whitney,
Approve.
Mr. Eisner,
Yes.
Mr. Urbowski,
Yes.
Mr. Elliott.
Yes. Opinion of the chair, the motion has been approved and your variance has been granted. You got 2 years to start construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Safe trip back. Thank you for your patience over there. Okay, the last item then is the fence variance, 1225 North Florida Avenue. And if we could have the staff report, please, Ms. Heather.
Yes, this application is to authorize a variance to increase the maximum height of a fence from 4 feet to 6 feet in the front yard of property in the R100 district. The subject property is located in the R100 district. The minimum front yard setback is 25 feet. The applicant is requesting a 6-foot-high block fence to be placed within the required front setback. The proposed block fence is located 10 feet from the property line. In 2000, the property owner at 1235 North Florida Avenue made a similar request, which was approved by the Board of Adjustment against the advice of the city staff. The subject property is located 2 lots south of 1235 North Florida Avenue. The adjacent neighbor at 1227 North Florida Avenue also has a fence within the required front setback. However, that fence is permitted at the 4-foot height, which meets section 36.0203B of the Land Development Code. The need for the variance is not a function of the physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions, or other physical or environmental conditions. The variance is requested based on the applicant's desire to create a total enclosure of their property. No conditions or special circumstances exist with respect to this request, therefore none have been self-created. Strict application of the code would require the applicant either to reduce the fence or of the height of the wall to 4 feet within the front yard setback, 25 feet from the property line, or set the wall back 25 feet 1 inch from the front property line at the height of 6 feet. Either way, strict application would not deprive reasonable use of the residential property measuring approximately 120 foot wide by 168 feet deep. The home is set back approximately 320 feet from North Florida Avenue. At least one variance for the same request has been granted in the immediate area. However, the R100 district is a single-family classification with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. The applicants have a uniquely large property which minimizes to some degree the magnitude of this request. As applied for a majority of home sites in the R100 district, granting this request would confer a special privilege. If approved, the variance will not diminish property values. However, the complete enclosure of non-estate R100 or smaller lots create a perception of rampant crime and is not conducive to curb appeal or pedestrian friendliness. Notice was sent to the property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. A legal notice was published in Tampa Bay Times, and staff, again, did not receive anything from additional property owners. There was actually no phone calls or anything on this particular request. The request is to increase the maximum allowed height of a fence within the front yard setback from 4 feet to 6 feet. The need for the variance is not a function of the physical surrounding, shape, topographic conditions, or other physical or environmental conditions. If approved, the variance will not diminish property values. However, the complete enclosure of non-estate R100 or smaller lots creates a perception of rampant crime and is not conducive to curb appeal or pedestrian friendliness. The granting of the variance would not extend a special privilege to the applicant. The granting of this variance would not hinder the character of the existing neighborhood and would not create a nuisance. The request does not conform to the general intent of the LDC and the policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends denial of the requested variance to increase the maximum height of a block fence from 4 to 6 feet within the front yard setback. The request does not meet the review criteria established in section 215.02B and 215.0.2.5 of the LDC. In the event that this board decides to recommend approval, staff has a couple of recommendations here. These are the same recommendations that were made, and this is almost a verbatim staff report that was written in the previous request. It was done that because staff does not concur with this recommendation as far as recommended approval, but if approval is warranted, there are some conditions because there are gates and things that are going to be proposed as part of this, and we need to be cognizant of those. So I will read these into the record. If the board chooses to start going down the path to possibly approve this, at that time, please give me some time after you've made your motion, before you vote, so that we can read those conditions into the record. And with that, staff can answer any questions that you might have.
And prior to staff having questions asked of them, I would just like to say, though there are minutes from a meeting, from this board's meeting in 2000, for a prior application, that is not to be considered, that is not relevant, that is not competent, that is not substantial. That was asked to be put in there, on my understanding, by the applicant, but that the board is not to consider any of that for the other application that has nothing to do with this property.
Thank you. Heather, again, there were no letters one way or the other?
No, we did not have letters either for or against this application. I do apologize that got in there. It does happen.
All right, no problem. No phone calls?
No.
Okay. Does the board have any questions of staff? And then we'll go to the applicant, if that's okay. Okay, would the applicant care to make a case, please? You're also entitled to cross-examine the staff if you have any questions of them.
Good evening, board members. My name is Philip Hansen. I am one of the owners of the property at 1225. We decided we wanted enclosure to the property. We came up with a plan that is a very nice fence. Simply, we're looking to do the same thing. I know that she said that they don't recommend it, but we want to do the same thing that they have there. We want to be able to achieve that 6-foot high fence. We're very far back from the road, so I get people driving up all the time, and you can't see. It's not like the rest of the houses in the neighborhood that are very close, and you can see people in front of the other houses. So she spends a lot of time alone in the home. I travel back to Chicago. I did speak with many of the neighbors and put together a little note that they do not object to the fence, and I can pass those around, as long as also with a plan of the proposed fence.
This is the proposed fence, or this is?
No, that's the fence that's just north of us at 1235. And it's actually 37-foot setback from the edge of pavement, which gives plenty of room. From 35 feet from the edge of pavement to the gate gives plenty of room for the right-of-way off the street.
Just for the record, we have, all these letters are the same, and there's about a dozen of them from people in the area. Is that a fair statement, sir, just for the record?
Yes, those are actual signed by the neighbors. I showed them the setback, I showed them the design, and they said they had no problem with any of it.
Just for the record, the letters state that they've reviewed the drawings and the setback requested and have no objection to a 6-foot block fence to be built at the subject property. I'll pass this down to our secretary, please. And this photograph of the fence wall next to it. And this is, you want to explain what this is, sir?
Yes.
Go back to the podium and
Essentially, this is, the columns are a little bit taller than 6 foot, and I understand that there is no set rule for the height of the columns. It's just the block wall itself. So we place the block wall at 6 foot. Those come up a little bit higher with a little lighting detail under each one of the caps, and there'll be low voltage lighting detail on each column. So this is pretty much what we have.
Is the entire 6 foot opaque according to that drawing?
It would be stucco, and then the columns would be stone veneer.
Opaque, and you see through it, like the fence?
No, you cannot see through it. It's solid block.
Okay, let's take that in evidence, please, and pass it down to our secretary. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please continue if you have any further comment.
That's all I have.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, do the letters include the neighbor that has the 4-foot fence? Did that neighbor?
Yes, yes, it does.
And the fence that is to the left of your property that we have a photo of, that's not actually 6 foot, is it?
Yes, it is. It's a 6 foot brick fence, and the columns are about 7'5".
And I'd just like to reiterate that regardless of whatever that fence is, that's not to be considered for this particular application. It's not part of the criteria.
Else?
We need to take that in as evidence?
I mean, again, as we've discussed before, the applicant can present whatever evidence the applicant needs to present, but it's up to the law that determines the competent substantial evidence, and I'm here just to advise you on what that looks like, and just to remind you, you need to stick to the criteria that's in your code, whether or not you agree with it or not.
Laurel?
I do have one. It says here the proposed block fence is located 10 feet from the property line.
Yes, that's 10 feet farther back from the property line. So we're essentially 37, we would be 37 feet from the edge of pavement.
Okay.
So it's quite a bit back. I mean, you could get a pickup truck plus a small trailer behind it and still be off of the roadway, out of the right-of-way.
Okay, can you explain to me about the wall being back 25 feet 1 inch? Where would that actually put the wall then?
50 feet,
50 feet back?
which is a big chunk of property
Thank
for a
you.
front yard.
Any more? More questions?
That's it, thank you.
Mr. Eisner?
Can I ask you why you want to put this fence up?
You know, we've always wanted to have a fence like this. It's been in our minds since we purchased the house 20 years ago. It's kind of been a thing that we've been thinking of for a long time. I travel back to Chicago quite often, and I'm gone for 2 weeks at a time, and my wife is alone. So her being at the top of the hill and not being visible from any other location, she really wants the security as well.
Will you be having fence running from that all the way up to your house?
Yes, on the side yard.
6 foot fence as well?
That'd be, 6 foot chain link.
Okay, is that anywhere in the variance that you're gonna have that as well?
We're allowed 6 foot on the side yard.
That is correct. They are allowed 6 foot in the side yard by right in the code.
But
they
is
are-
that not from the front of the house back?
That's correct.
But
So
this is not in the front of the house, this is,
exactly, if he's asking for a fence 10 foot off his property line, the assumption is he's going to completely wall in. It's not just he's asking for that wall. He's asking for the fence of 6 feet, and then that would go beyond to whatever he does in the backyard, as long as it's consistent with the maximum of 6 feet. He's allowed to do that by right.
I have the plat of survey with me.
And that is part of his permit, which it has already been submitted.
You need to be on the record, sir. Can you speak into the microphone or over there?
So on the plat of survey that I just provided to you, shows the property line, which is 25 feet back from edge of pavement. What we're requesting is another 10 feet added onto that, which essentially is 37 feet, the same as 1235 has at this point. So again, that puts us 37 feet back from the road. which gives plenty of room for the right-of-way to be off of the right-of-way of the street, and it's set back far enough that it, lines up with the other fence that's just north of us.
So this is supposed to be also for some security?
Yes, yes.
Have you had any issues with any security in the area?
I have had some instances where we have people drive up to the house anywhere from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. at night asking if we want trees trimmed, if we want any work done around the yard. She feels very uncomfortable, answering the door. We've had, and that happens probably maybe every other week. We get somebody coming up in a pickup truck. And
have you ever decided to call the Tarpon police?
I haven't really had any situations other than last year when I did leave the property. I returned to find the ramps to one of my trailers were stolen and a lawnmower. I did not report it because at that point I couldn't prove, where it went, who stole it, or whatever, and I had no idea of the time frame that it went missing. So. And
to chime in again, as far as security is concerned, we've discussed this before. That's not part of the criteria, so that's not to be considered for this application. I'm sorry, it's my job.
Further questions?
Then no.
All right, let me. Oh, great. Very fine application, sir. Thank you very much. A 4-foot fence would also block these salesmen from coming in, correct? If you had a gate there and could keep people from driving up your driveway, is that right?
Yeah, but they'd probably be able to jump a 4-foot a lot easier than a 6-foot.
Okay. The wall that's been approved, that's 2 doors north of you, the top couple of feet or so is not opaque, right? It's got some see-throughs in the brick.
Yeah, it's got small half-brick openings, that's correct.
Would that be a possibility you might consider, or no?
Sure.
And I was out there today, and I saw some flags. Those are the property line flags?
Okay, I'm going to ask that you not talk about what you saw when you went to the property.
All right, did you have any flags on your property line, sir?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. We had a similar application a few months ago, and it was discussed that perhaps a 6-foot fence is less secure than a 4-foot fence, because people, once they get over that 6-foot fence, they're more or less invisible from the street, and I'd like to know what your comments are about that, and perhaps the board can pick up on that.
I'm going to just say before you answer, that's not relevant, neither is it competent or substantial evidence for this application. But, okay. Sir, you may answer.
Please answer the question, sir. Thank you.
Pardon me?
Okay. Some people have said from this board that a 6-foot fence is not as safe as a 4-foot fence because people can hide behind the 6-foot fence easier than a 4-foot fence.
Yeah, they can hide just as easily behind a 4-foot fence. They crouch down, they can do whatever they have to do. I mean, I'm simply asking, the board to allow us to have the same variance that our neighbors have. We're not asking for a 0 setback, but I certainly, to go 6 foot and go 50 feet into my property when I have 350 foot of driveway to my house, I don't think it's too much to ask for.
Heather, at the last variance, we talked about the possibility of building up the base of the fence. Remember that? You can raise the ground so that you can have the wall being a 4-foot wall and still have a 6-foot height. Do you follow what I'm saying? We talked about that, and you said it was okay to do that. Did I explain myself properly?
The fence is taken from whatever the ground level is. So depending upon where something is located determines whether or not you can build a berm or you can add additional fill to a piece of property. That's something that the building code, it's actually the flood code determines where in the city you can add fill to a site, because otherwise if you add too much fill to a site, you have to compensate for that additional fill elsewhere as a result of flooding issues that we have. So the building code would determine if on this particular piece of property a berm or an elevation of the property could occur prior to the installation of the fence. But yes, whatever the height of the ground level is, that's where we measure the height of the fence.
Okay, in my comments or questions raised, any further questions from the board?
The only other thing that I might say is that, even with the 4-foot fence, I know that there was some conditions with the other approval about the gate. I don't know what the difference is between not obstructing the right-of-way by having 25 feet to the fence and being at 0 setback, or being at 37 feet. I would think at 37 feet, you've got a much greater ability to have the egress to get your vehicles or vehicle and trailer off the road. So.
Let me stick my neck out and ask another dumb question. Heather, is it possible to have, in essence, 2 fences in the front? Could he build a 4-foot fence and then somehow build a 6-foot fence within the curtilage of that property and be in compliance with the code?
If he chooses to build he can build a 4-foot fence anywhere from property line 0 out to 25 feet in the front yard. Beyond that, he requires a variance anything within that area. If he goes to 25 feet and 1 inch, okay, he can build a 6-foot fence because he's outside what's considered the front yard setback. He may still be in his front yard because his front yard is 320 feet from the actual property line, but he would not be in what the city has established in R100 as the front yard. So yes, he could build a 4-foot fence on property line 0 up to property line 25, and then anything beyond 25, he could build a 6-foot high fence and permit it today.
So if I wanted to build a garage, for instance, would I have to come back 25 feet from the front yard to build a garage?
You would have to come back 25 feet from the property line. Any structure, in this case a fence, a garage, addition to the house, any of those type of things must be outside of all of the setbacks.
But a fence is not a living structure.
A fence is defined as a structure in our code, which is the reason why it requires a setback.
And would that apply to a chain link fence, for instance, as well?
It would apply to any fence that is greater than 4 feet in the front yard. Doesn't matter any type of fence that you construct in the front yard cannot be higher than 4 feet. We consider it a structure, and therefore it must meet the setback. Outside of the front yard setback, it can be higher. It can go up to 6 feet, which is the maximum for residential property.
Another question for Ms. Erler, excuse me. If this proposed variance application is granted and it's set back further than the wall that's 2 doors down, it would have kind of a sawtooth appearance, you think? Would you care to discuss that a little bit? No, it wouldn't be on the same plane?
It really doesn't matter if it's on the same plane anyway. There's a property between the adjacent property does not have a 6-foot high fence. So you're going to have a 6-foot high fence, a 4-foot high fence, and a 6-foot high fence if you approve this variance. How that visually is going to play out would be no different than if the distance from where it is measured from the property line is different. The staff is making the recommendations if you choose to go forward based on what was previously approved, because that is what's consistent with what actions have been taken here. Now, that does not mean staff supports this, because staff clearly does not support this. Clearly, staff has not supported any type of application for a fence, an increase of a fence in a front yard.
Further comments from the board?
I'd like you to know, sir, you're not probably privy to the fact that we went through this a few months ago with another property, multiple times, actually, the same property. And so I'm just going to make it clear. I would be okay with you putting a 10-foot fence in front of your property. I believe that should be your right. However, apparently in the county and in this city, they only allow 4 foot. And So we had to deny based on that, this woman, and she had similar concerns. And it's just unfortunate that the property next door to you was granted that.
Yes.
So that is really, yeah, it's very disturbing, because to me, that would be how I would go. All right, but to follow this code, I don't believe that I can do that. And that's where I'm torn, because to me, you should be allowed to do that. And the person on the right-hand side of your property should be allowed to do that, or whatever, if they put a 1-foot fence, whatever. To me, that's how it ought to be, but apparently that is not how it is.
Yes, I do understand, and I think that those properties are a little different than the average property in Tarpon, being so long. The property, if you look at the plat, is 700 some odd feet long.
Oh, you're correct.
And it's quite sizable, and I do pay a lot of taxes, and I would like to have the ability to what somebody else has on my block, and that's all I'm asking the board for. I've got letters from all my neighbors. They do not object to it, and I would hope that the board would consider that.
How do we consider this, though, when we've just denied it for another Tarpon resident?
I don't think that their property was quite as big as mine.
Well, how does size matter in this situation?
I believe that where my house is in relation to the road, the 320 feet, puts me out of the line sight. I just would like to have my property enclosed, and that is my dream, to have the fence that I've been thinking about for 20 years.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say, just for your consideration, regardless of what you guys have ever done with any other application that's come before you, and I understand the application you're talking about, but regardless of that, the application that you have before you, with the materials you have before you, and the criteria you have before you, that's all you're to consider today. What you've done in the past is not indicative of what you can do in the future. It's just based on the criteria.
The only thing I'm doing is I'm asking.
No, I understand.
him-
I'm just saying it's come up a couple times, so I just want to make sure from a legal point of view.
And
As is my
from my point of view, I have to ask you to try your best to change my mind and make me believe that this is something that is necessary, and it can't be because you've looked at this it's been your dream for 20 years.
Okay, well, then let me go down another road. Let me talk about some of the places like Tarpon Key that has a fence that's almost 16 feet when you're driving down along the road there, and the setback is only about 18 feet from the road. Okay, let me talk about some of the other developments that are farther down by Cloisterman that have 6-foot fences, and they're at 0 setback. They're right up against the sidewalk. To me, what's the difference? There's homes back there as well.
So then you're asking us to make a decision on what somebody else made possibly an incorrect decision on.
I'm only asking the board to give me the ability to put a fence up that has been done once on my block already, and I don't know if anybody else will decide in the future to ask for the same thing, but I would just ask the board that to consider all my letters and my evidence that I be approved.
I would like to ask the attorney, you said that the previous board decision is not competent or substantial?
That is not what I said. I said that the decision that they made in that is not to be taken as competent, substantial evidence for this application. What this board has previously either approved or denied in the past has nothing to do with the application that's before you compared to the criteria you have before you. So regardless of how similar or dissimilar or whatnot, the criteria is based on this individual platted property with this individual variance. Every variance that comes before this board is individualized. It is that application before you, it is that piece of property, and is based on the criteria. And the criteria is specific, it has to be to that specific property. So regardless of whatever you've done in the past, that should not have any bearing on what you do for this application. And same for the future. What you do on this application doesn't set a precedent for what you do in the future on any other applications that come before you, because the variance is specific to the property that you are considering now, not to all fences in Tarpon, or all fences in the zoning district, or all fences on this block, or all garages, or all whatever. It is this application, this property, this specific piece of property before you. So whether or not they use competent substantial evidence, what I said was that that decision is not relevant or competent substantial evidence to be considered for this application.
Can I ask a question? Why was he granted a variance?
Excuse me?
Why was he granted the variance?
It doesn't make a difference. And I don't know, to be honest, we've got the minutes,
It doesn't make a
but
difference?
it doesn't make a difference because
He
he's
built a
not.
$3 million home, and you don't know why he was granted a variance.
It doesn't make a difference for this board or for your application. The way that the
I
code
see.
is written is it's specific to your property. So if it's a
Mm-hmm.
physical hardship on your property that doesn't allow you to build a 4-foot fence, that you are required to have a 6-foot fence,
I understand.
then that's the case. But you can build a 4-foot fence. There's nothing keeping you from doing that.
I understand. At a zero setback.
Whatever the case may be, whatever the decision was made and based on whatever it was made on before is not relevant to your application. And same if you have a neighbor that comes in next week, or well, not next week, but next month and says, I want to build the same thing, they may have different conditions on their property, and it's going to be a whole different ballgame. So that's the way that the law, I mean, like I said, I'm always the bad
I
guy.
understand.
That's legally how it
understand.
works.
All that I've done is provided what I can for my case. I've got letters from all the neighbors on both sides of me, across the street, on other blocks, and they do not object. And I would just ask that I be granted the same.
So you're saying no matter what decision is made, there is no setting of any precedent,
No, there is no setting of any precedent.
and therefore there would be no repercussion from other people that were denied a request if this man were granted a request.
I did not say that.
Ah.
Those are two separate things. If someone if you were to, regardless of this application, any application that comes before the board, if you approve one application and somebody comes a year later and you deny that application, and somebody in the public thinks that one of those two decisions was wrong, and they're an affected party, they can make a stink about it and insert themselves into it, provided that there's time limits for that, and cause some problems. So
And what kind of
I'm
problem would they
asking for
cause?
specificity. Make a stink about it. What does that
I'm
mean?
not going to be able to give you specificity. I mean,
What mechanisms would have someone, would be afforded to someone if they felt they were slighted and then someone else was granted a variance?
Well, I mean, you get that all the time in all kinds of cities. There's litigation all up and down Pinellas County for these types of things where one neighbor gets something, one neighbor doesn't, and one neighbor says, well, the city shouldn't have done that. And so they insert themselves, they take an appeal of the decision of the board, and then it gets litigated in court. It's protracted litigation for years and years, and at the end of the result, it's the city has spent money, the parties have spent money, and at the end of the day, the decision is whatever the decision is. So, regardless of all that, your decision, again, it should be based on the criteria, which I understand y'all do not necessarily agree with, but should be based on the criteria, which is the law, and based on the competent substantial evidence before you, specific to this application. And y'all make the decision you need to make, but it needs to be based on that.
Yeah, I respond. Make a comment or two? Fine. I appreciate what the council is saying. In fact, I said the same thing for 15 years. But it's not as easy as you might think to treat people differently. And here's two parcels that are extremely similar. One variance has been granted, and this is going to be much further away. The proposal is much further away from the street line than the one before. The one before has had some peepholes at the top, so it doesn't look like it's a 6-foot barricade with a Fort Knox type appearance. He's willing to be compatible with. That might help a little bit. it's gonna have a little bit of a sawtooth. If you look at West Tarpon Avenue, how the buildings are set back differently, some buildings are set back 15 feet, 20 feet. One building encroaches into the right-of-way, the motel. So you're used to it. You see what I'm talking about? That, West Tarpon Avenue, where the buildings are all set back differently, we're used to it. You live with it. This is a dead-end street with very little traffic. I live around the corner, and I'm sorry, that's evidence, but
I'm doing my job. You
yeah, I know.
called yourself
I
before.
understand. I understand. So I'm listening to you. So, and shall we just say that there's been no objections that I've been aware of to the wall that's there now, and this gentleman is willing to build much further in. He can also build, from what I'm hearing, he could build a 4-foot fence in compliance with the code without a variance, and then go in some 30 or 40 feet and build a 6-foot wall, and do that without a variance as well. You can also raise the berm at the base and make a 4-foot fence, and yet it would be 6 feet from the street level. So I'm torn also, we all are. It's a tough issue. The city commission has said we don't want to live in a walled community. Everybody has a 4-foot fence, very few 6-foot fences. There's been some comments made from people who know safety that having a 6-foot wall can be more dangerous than a 4-foot wall. So, I don't know if I've added any confusion or not, but there are two sides to the issue, and fortunately I vote last. So.
Well, there's only one set of criteria, so.
Thank you. Yes, any public comment? Nope.
I just want to say, I just can't see that, I appreciate that you want to have a 6-foot fence, wall, but I just don't see personally the setting precedents, the difference between the 4 and 6, because I guess we're not allowed to discuss the security end of it. So I can't really consider that, which we've also discussed security, and that is not even a case. That's why I'm just answering you, because you had said you were away in Chicago and you're traveling and whatnot.
Sure.
I just did want you to know I did check on crime rate in the area there. It is non-existent. It's
Well, I wouldn't
probably-
say non-existent. There was a gentleman murdered in his own home right around the corner.
I'm aware of that as well, but I'm just saying in your area where you're living, that was a different kind of case. But
It was
I'm just having-
it was his maintenance man.
Inside job, different.
Not so different when somebody comes up your driveway and they have chainsaws in the back of their car.
Well, in that case, I know this is not part of the variance, but if that was somebody wanting to do harm to anybody, it can be done.
That's
I
correct.
just have it, it's very hard for me to change or want to override the law. And that's where I'm having a tough time with.
I understand. And as she said, that, she understands that somebody could come along and make us think about somebody else has, and I could probably do the same thing.
I could also add, there's lots of other ways of protecting yourself besides building a wall.
I understand.
Electronic security, there's animals, there's security guards, there's...
Very, very true. I am only asking the board for what's already been approved on another property that's just north of me on the same block. It would put everything in line, and I think that all my neighbors would be happy with it because it's a beautiful fence.
Certainly.
And that's
You want
where
to
I'm
make
at.
a comment, ma'am? You raised your hand. Would you want to go to the podium and say something, please? State your name, please.
My name is Leanna Hansen. I am the wife of Phil Hansen. My comment is that I'm very high up on a hill, and the other properties are much closer to the road, so if there was an issue, if somebody were to come in with a truck to try to move furniture or steal anything from the place, the neighbors can see it easily. I am so high up on the hill that you could drive up there and you could have your car and rob my entire place and take everything you want before a neighbor would even notice that there are cars or robbers up there. Everyone in the neighborhood there is almost zero variance to the place. So when I come by, if I see a big moving truck or I see somebody trying to take something, I would call the police right away. Where I'm that high, you can't see anything. I mean, you could drive up there, do whatever you want for hours and hours, and by the time any neighbors saw it, I'd be finished. I could get murdered, I could get robbed, anything could happen. I'm just kind of afraid of living there without more ample security.
And we also would abide by the fire marshal's regulation where he would have access key and the key panel as well. And when she is not around and I'm not around and we're both in Chicago, I would probably have somebody watching the property as well, so.
Any further comments? Is there a motion?
I move
Ms. Whitney?
to, I move to vote on, oh, do I have to
What's
say
your
all
motion?
this?
What's your motion?
I,
There are conditions. Heather, you want to get into the
Wait a-
conditions now or later, or
all
what?
right, maybe I should let you move, I'll second.
Oh, no, go ahead.
It depends on what the
What the
motion
motion
is. If you would give me the motion, and then I'll determine whether or not we need to add the conditions based on your motion.
You either need to move to approve or move to deny.
I
or
move to deny the application on North Florida Avenue.
The
Is there a
motion, is there a second?
I second.
There's no need for the conditions.
Okay.
Ms. Whitney?
Wait, is there any discussion on the motion? Or any further discussion? I think we've exhausted the topic. All right, let's call the question, please. Kim,
Ms. Whitney?
Deny.
you voting yes to,
I'm voting,
On the
no-
motion.
yes, I'm voting yes to deny the motion.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
no. Opinion of the chair that the variance request has been denied. That's the end of our agenda, as far as the petitions are concerned. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
He
Appreciate
needs
it.
any of his stuff back too.
Yeah. We can get the surveys back. There you go. Good job.
Thank you.
Get some more surveys back. Ms. Erwiller, please. Your turn.
Oh, I need these for the record.
We can make copies if you don't mind and then return them to you, if that would be all right. Yeah, because that's my color. But can we make a copy for you and return it? If you can either wait till the end of the meeting or we can return it another time to you. Okay, that would work.
Thank you.
You too.
Good evening.
No, I do not have any comments at this time.
But I do. At our special meeting, I know that we had talked about, and it kind of came up tonight too, about some of the repercussions, what happens when, you know, you don't necessarily stick to the criteria, and, you know, and I know there's some personal concerns there, and practical concerns as well. There was a recent Pinellas Court Sixth Circuit decision. The court sat in its appellate position instead of its trial position, and handed down a $16.5 million judgment to Pinellas County. And the specific reason, the end-all be-all reason why that happened is because the Pinellas Planning Council did not stick to the criteria. Verbatim, right out of the case, they chose, it went up on appeal, the court said, remanded back down, consult your criteria. They didn't. They listened to public opinion. The public was outraged. They didn't want the development to go through. They didn't want anything to happen. And they listened to the court of public opinion. It went back up on appeal, and the court said, you can't do that. and said, again, you need to stick to the criteria and slap the county with $16.5 million. So while, you know, Tarpon Springs is likely not to, and I can't say that. There may very well be a case that a large developer comes in and, you know, this board denies a variance and they get all upset about it and then they decide to seek action. But as long as, you know, it's just one example, as long as you guys stick to the criteria, which I know is difficult and you know, sometimes can pose a little bit of a problem, but as long as you do that, you won't run into any sticky situations like that. And Lord knows that Tarpon Springs does not want a $16.5 million judgment. So that is it.
We need to vote on officers for the forthcoming year. I think we talked about it at our last meeting, and I think it's appropriate at this time. If not, please let me know. To elect a chairman.
I nominate Mr. Elliott for chair.
Any further nominations? Any further nominations besides me?
No, it would be you. You're doing a fine job.
Thank you. Well, appreciate it. So let's vote on the motion.
Ms. Whitney,
Yes.
Mr. Eisner,
I am voting for Herb Elliott, yes.
Mr. Urbowski,
Yes.
Mr. Elliott.
I can't abstain, right? I have a conflict of interest or something like that, but motion's carried, 3-0. I will say, I'm not going to get too involved in that other Pinellas County case, but in this case, the neighbors were all in favor of the variance.
It doesn't make a difference.
And
Yeah, it's
then
criteria is
we-
criteria, so.
but we stuck to the criteria.
Listen, you have to do that as far as with the other case as well. You know, the other case, I don't mind sharing, I don't know if you know, it was they passed the variance on dogs. They had dogs that could jump the 4-foot fence. And,
But again, and that's in that case, right?
Right.
And that
But
board and.
I can't sit there and ask them, do you have dogs, or are you interested in buying dogs?
But it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, correct, I understood that.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no further comments, meeting's adjourned, 8:15. Oh, next month, anything new? Any ideas about next month, as far as
At
applicants?
this point, the deadline is Friday, so I don't have any current applications. There are always folks that are trying, but whether they'll make it or not, I don't know.
There might be some by Friday.
Possible.
Okay, we're adjourned, thank you.
Not an easy job.
Okay. So you can buy her house and then instead of being the city attorney, you sit on my board. Then you can sit on
I'm sure it's a lovely house, but no.
I stood by it. It was here. So